little bit of a technical difficulty, guys. I'm going to stop this. Can you see the screen?
Yep, we can see a blanked out screen.
All right, let's try that one more time. Sorry, everybody. I'm going to try this again. There we go. Okay, we're back.
All right.
Let's start this up. All right. I'm gonna bring you guys in right now. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty there.
Can you tell we're in pledge season?
Yes, we are in pledge season. So that's a video I'm probably going to play for a few more of these segments because that's what we're all about right now, right?
Yes, it is. And so what's on the agenda today is we're going to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to go to your questions. So if you have questions that you want us to answer, put them in the comments and make them short, and we will do our best to get all of them and not miss any. So if you've got any, that's a place to put them in there. And so we'll get some.
Yeah, I just thought we really haven't done a Q&A session. So I thought I'm going to be discussing a little bit of Article 5. But after that, let's try to get as many questions out there that we can address. A lot of the same questions come up, but I thought the three of us could just try to do the best that we can, try to share information that we have to help you understand maybe Article 5 better, or also the importance of term limits for Congress. So let me do some introductions. I'm Ken Quinn, Regional Director. I cover the Northeast region. And why don't you guys introduce yourself, and then we'll kick this party off.
My name is Ron Hooper, and I am the Western States. I take the Western 17 states. And happy to be here today. Mr. Clark?
Well, my name is Ken Clark, and I'm in the Southern region, and I run, I think, 16 states. And so I can never keep count. There's just too many of them to count. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we're getting some interesting questions. And so I'm excited about that. And there is a lot being done to further this effort. And once we explain the process, I think you'll understand what it's going to take. And so, you know, we can't get this done without your help. And so we'll get into that a lot, and we'll get into that as we progress throughout this broadcast. So
yeah, let me Yeah, some house cleaning here. So what we'd love to have everybody do is, as you can see here, I can pull up your comments if they're very short. Otherwise, they won't fit. So please let us know what state you're in. I'll be trying to juggle this on the background and pull them up. And if you have a real short question, if I can pull it up on the screen, I will do that. If not, we will just try to read it from the comment section here. So if you guys can just keep your eyes open for some, let's do this. If you're going to ask a question, put a capital Q first and then your questions. So that way they're easier for us to find. So why don't we'll make that the ground rules. And then I'm going to try to just pull some of these up as we go. And okay, so Clark, well, listen, we'll cover what Article 5 is all about as we get into this presentation, but why don't you briefly share a little bit about the opposition? Why are there some groups out there, and don't mention any yet, I'll go into the details, but what is the biggest issue that we have with some groups that are out there in both the left and the right?
You know, it's funny because the left and the right both use the exact, and I'm talking about the extreme left and the extreme right, because the moderates, the people in the middle, the typical conservative, the typical, what you would call blue dog Democrat or Reagan Democrat, whatever.
You mean like 82% of the voters?
Yeah, but it's a little bit higher than that. 84% of the voters nationwide, they want term limits. But what our opposition likes to do is they like to scare people into running from our effort. And we've talked about this a lot before, but we have to use a process inside the Constitution called Article 5 in order to propose an amendment to the United States Constitution in order to get this done. The Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court in 1995, Thornton versus United States, or excuse me, U.S. term limits, US, decided or made a decision that in order to get term limits on Congress, you had to amend the Constitution. Okay, that's why we can't put it on the ballot. That's why you can never vote on it. That's why we, the people, can't actually check a box when we go to the polling booth. The Supreme Court said you can't do that. We have to amend the Constitution. So our opposition likes to put out a bunch of fear tactics in regards to Article 5. They call it a con or a constitutional convention. They call it a runaway. They have all these different terms that they use to demagogue Article 5. None of them are true, but that's what they do.
Yep.
They do this for several different reasons. Number one, they're genuinely afraid that we'll get term limits on Congress. Number two, they're use it as a vehicle to raise money. And it's a fear tactic, and people will break out their checkbooks and they'll send money to all these organizations when they're afraid. And so those are basically the two reasons why they do it. But they come up with all these different, ludicrous arguments against us, but it's basically out of fear. And they use it. The biggest reason they attack us is to raise money for their own organization.
All right, thanks, Ken. Yeah, that's a good introduction. So we're going to get into one of these groups today because I would say they've been at it the longest in opposing an Article 5 convention. And I have a little bit of a personal history with this organization because this is where I was getting a lot of my information from. And so let me share my screen and let me just make sure I got all right. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to share my screen, a little presentation here. We call this our Constitutional Article 5 Corner. We got to come up with a name for this segment, I think. And I am going to make this the full screen. Let's see how this works. Nothing yet, huh?
Nothing yet.
All right, bear with me. Hold on. There it is. Okay, I'm grabbing it. There we go. I think this will work. Okay, so let's talk about this. And then, so Article 5, and there is, this is what I call the opposition. What is a con drone? And I use this in a mocking way. But this is what we in the Article 5 realm, this is what we call these individuals, both on the left and the right. This is the fear mongering that Ken was talking about. And when you hear them, well, let me just get right to the screen here. The John Birch Society. Okay, so this is the organization that has been going after and opposing an Article 5 convention for a very, very long time, basically back in the 70s, late 70s. And if you notice, there's their campaign, Stop a Con-Con. And what they want people to think is that an Article 5 convention is a constitutional convention. Okay, it is not. And we're going to clearly go over that in this presentation. And let me show you the next screen here. So this is right from their website. And this is the fear mongering that they spew. I'll just quickly read it in case you can't see it. A constitutional convention would have the power to become a runaway convention that could completely change the Constitution. How do we know such a convention could become a runaway? Number one, there's the precedent of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, which completely rewrote the Articles of Confederation and changed the ratification procedure. And number two, there's the right of the sovereign people meeting in convention to alter or abolish their form of government, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, which could include rewriting the Constitution and changing the ratification procedure. Ooh, very, very scary.
Ooh, that drives me absolutely insane. You've got to talk about number one, because that one actually makes me angry.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to do a deep dive into that. But long story short, the 1787 convention was not called to revise the Articles of Confederation. It was called by the state of Virginia to devise whatever means necessary to render the federal constitution adequate for the exigencies of the Union. It was a full, open, broad scope that gave them full authority to draft a new constitution. And if you have any question or doubt about that, read Federalist 40 by James Madison, because he goes into that charge by the anti-federalists, because the anti-federalists were trying to prevent the Constitution from getting ratified. And so he just blows away that nonsense. So we'll do that another day, because that's a little detail, but that's it in a nutshell. And the sad thing about this, okay, guys, so I'm going to be honest with everybody out there. I used to believe this. Okay, so I was on this side of the fence. Long story short, I was buying into this nonsense. I was telling my legislators here in Maine, never do this, never support an Article 5 convention. It will be the end of the world, okay? Because I was just getting the information from this organization. I've got a DVD they put out. It's called Beware of Article 5. And it's rather ironic, because here's an organization that claims to be supporting the Constitution, and yet they're fearful of the Constitution. So,
well, not only that, they claim the Constitution itself is illegitimate because of the process. So they want to defend what they later call an illegal contract or constitution.
Yeah. Basically, they're claiming the Constitution is an illegal document. So it makes no sense. And so long story short, once I did my own research, I quickly realized that this group, along with others, it's not just them. There's others on the right and on the left, but it's the same story. They all use the same talking points. They are using this, as you said, to raise a lot of money. That Stop a Con-Con, that's their fundraiser engine right there. And so once I realized the truth on this, I embraced Article 5. I was no longer afraid of it, and I realized the framers in their wisdom were geniuses, and they gave us this as a check against a runaway federal government. So what we want to address today is this idea of a con-con, and we're going to show you how an Article 5 convention is not a con-con. It's not a constitutional convention. Now, one of the proofs here is there's a letter by James Madison written to this gentleman, George Lee Tuberville, in November of 1788. Now, here's the context. Let's go back in time a little bit. The Constitution was ratified just a few months earlier. The ninth state to put it into motion was New Hampshire. They ratified it, I believe, in June of 1788. Yet the federal government had not begun yet. The federal government would not begin until March 4th, 1789. So we're during this period of time where the Constitution has been ratified, the government has not started. This is what was happening. The anti-federalists, there's a bunch of them in New York, and the governor of New York sent out a circular letter asking for another convention, and it was an open convention. They had tons of amendments. They basically wanted to address every article in the Constitution with amendments and change the whole thing. So basically, they were seeking another constitutional convention. They didn't want this one getting ratified, and so they wanted to redo. They wanted a complete redo. So Madison is addressing this question from George, and he got a letter from George, and he says, "You wish to know my sentiments on the project of another general convention as suggested by New York." If you read the letter, it's very, very eye-opening. And what I wanted to show you was in the very letter that the John Birch Society will use against an Article 5, he actually explains the differences between the two types of conventions. And here it is. He goes, quote, "A convention cannot be called without the unanimous consent of the parties who are to be bound by it if first principles are to be recurred to." Now remember that, first principles. That is referring to a constitutional convention. First principles is the foundation, and I'm going to show that to you. And then he continues, he says this, "Or without the previous application of 2/3 of the state legislatures if the forms of the Constitution are to be pursued." That's your Article 5 convention to propose amendments. So you have unanimous consent for first principles or a foundation, which is a constitutional convention. You have 2/3 applications by the state legislatures for the forms, or what we would say amendments of the Constitution. Okay. And then he goes on to say this: "The difficulties in either of these cases must evidently be much greater than will attend the origination of amendments in Congress, which may be done at the instance of a single state legislature or even without a single instruction on the subject." So the whole gist of his letter was this. There's no way, because think about this, the anti-federalists, there's a huge war against this Constitution. It was a long battle. He didn't want to go through that again. And he's basically saying, listen, it's going to be too difficult to unanimous consent of all 13 states to call a convention to redo it. It's even going to be too hard to get 2/3 to agree to the amendments to call an Article 5. The simplest way of getting, and this was for the Bill of Rights mainly, was to just have Congress introduce them. And he was suggesting, listen, let some time pass before we have another convention. Let the members of Congress introduce amendments. And so that's the whole gist of his letter. I highly recommend you read it to get the context. So what he's referring to when he mentioned first principles and the forms actually comes from the Declaration of Independence. I just want to read two paragraphs. Quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter," that's amend, okay? "To alter the government is to amend it or to abolish it. There's your new constitution to create a new one." And then he says, "And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles," there's your first principles that he referred to in that letter, "and organizing its powers in such form," and there's the forms of the Constitution, "as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." So he's actually referring back to the Declaration to either have a constitutional convention for the first principles to lay the foundation, or to organize its powers under the form of the Constitution. That's what he's talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah, in fact, I'm surprised there's that much confusion between a full constitutional convention and an Article 5 convention. And it seems to be, I don't know if they're purposely confused or it just sounds good to them, but we run into that all the time.
Well, they're purposely confused. They do this for a reason.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people and a lot of organizations out there invested in the status quo. They do not want the federal government to be fixed. There is trillions of dollars at stake. I mean, trillions upon trillions. We know that.
Yeah.
All right. And so it doesn't really benefit we the people. But I mean, think about all the different organizations out there that exist with money that comes from the federal government. We threaten that.
Yeah.
All right. And so the other ones, they want to raise money to boost their own organization. So selfishness is what happens. That is the reason.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, because once the people figure out that this really is a viable tool for them, there's all kinds of other initiatives. I mean, you can talk to any people on the street and they can tell you the top 3 things that need to be done. And so once the people realize the power of the states, it'll make all the difference.
So guys, let me wrap this up here, because this is what all you have to do is read the text of Article 5, and you can clearly see this is not a constitutional convention. I'm just going to read the first couple of sections. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. And here's the kicker, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution. Clearly, Article 5 is not a constitutional convention. You can only propose amendments. And anybody that cannot see that, they are either being completely dishonest, or maybe they just have never read it and have been ignorant of it. So you only can fall into 2 categories with this issue, okay? So in a nutshell, this is a chart I put together to show you the differences. And I'll briefly go through this. So number 1, first principles. That is a constitutional convention. It's called to draft a new constitution. It has full powers, unlimited powers. In fact, to go back to Article 5, when they, remember guys, we covered this another time, when they passed by unanimous consent to for the convention mode of Article 5, a motion was made to give Article 5 the power of a constitutional convention, and they rejected it. Remember that? So they turned down giving Article 5 full constitutional convention powers. The authority to call a constitutional convention is outside of the Constitution. It requires unanimous consent for the states to be bound to it. It's called by the states, not by Congress. And the scope of the passage during the convention, it has to be passed completely, unanimously as a whole document. Unanimous consent is required, and then the entire Constitution must get ratified as a complete document, and only the states that ratify it are bound to it. Completely different than Article 5. Okay, Article 5 is just amendments. It's limited to what 2/3 of the states apply for. It's limited to the subject matter of the applications submitted by today would be 34 states. It's under Article 5. It's called by Congress once they get 2/3 applications. It's designed to introduce or propose single amendments. It only requires a simple majority at the convention, and then it requires 3/4 to ratify, and then it would bind all 50 states. So that's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, it's massive.
All right, so there you go. A constitutional convention cannot be called under Article 5. So when you hear people talk about this, please set them straight. Let them know the difference, because we've got
Yeah, so Article 5 is just around amendments, and of course the Constitutional Convention is an entire new constitution.
Well,
And so the requirements are totally different for them. That's good to hear. That made it much simpler for me.
the key word in that entire thing is this: propose amendments to this Constitution. And words have meaning, you know? I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. We need to get to our questions.
All right. Okay. So let me, I'm going to review some of these.
Let me start. I've got a couple of them queued up. And so Randy says, what's preventing this from moving forward? Well, what's preventing it, first of all, is what we just talked about, the opposition. And second of all, we need a groundswell of grassroots nationwide to put pressure on their state legislators in order to pass our resolution. We need 34 states to pass that resolution. So the only thing stopping us is we need more of the public to be getting involved. Ron, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to termlimits.com Hall of Fame and check out and see if your legislator's in there. It makes a big difference. There's been 20 states that have passed resolutions to call for an Article 5. And so we're getting closer in time. And the mood of the people is really high on this now. So first thing you do is sign the petition. Second thing you do is go to Hall of Fame and see who's in there from your state. And then the third thing to do is reach out and rattle their chain. Let them know that this is important to you.
Hey, here's a great question from Michelle Bell. Is this a real possibility? And this definitely is a real possibility. Just to give you a little background on Article 5 applications, there's been over 400 of these submitted to Congress. The states, we have 17 amendments now to the Constitution that started through this effort, the states pushing for an amendment. That's how we got the Bill of Rights. That's how we got several others. I'm not going to go into detail there. We've come very close. We got the 17th Amendment, which is the direct election of senators, came within 2 states of calling a convention. But what the process did, it forced Congress or prodded Congress to propose that amendment. And that's how we got the 17th Amendment. We came within, I think, 2 states in the early 80s of calling a convention for a balanced budget amendment. Okay. And so we came in striking distance. One issue came 1 state away. It was to the apportionment of state legislatures came within 1 state shy of forcing a convention. So I'm saying all of this to share that, listen, folks, we can get this done. This is one issue that can bring this country together. People on the left, in the middle, on the right, they want term limits for Congress. And we got to put the pressure on the state legislatures to make this happen. And like Ron said, we're getting there. 15 states legislatures have submitted an application for congressional term limits in it. And we got to keep the pedal to the metal. So is it a possibility? Absolutely. Is it a heavy lift? Yes. So let's.
Well, and it should be. It should be a heavy lift because amending the Constitution is a big deal, and it should be. And so John asks, where do we start? Is there a petition, GoFundMe, etc.? Whoa, that's mine. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, there is. Go to termlimits.com. termlimits.com. We've got an entire organization built around this effort. We've got chapters in all 50 states. I mean, that is what we are trying to do. So we're here. We've been around for a long time. I mean, think about it. The Supreme Court case that I cited, that was 1995, Thornton versus U.S. term limits, us. There was a time before that decision that you could put it on the ballot and vote for it. No longer. The Supreme Court took that freedom away from us. So now this is the way we go. And so Bruce asks, when is anything going to actually get done on this? Waiting. We're doing it. Go to our website. Get involved. Help us. We are doing it right now. So we're not just talking about it. Ron, Ken, and I go to state to state to state. We testify in Senate hearings, House hearings, all over the country, pushing this agenda. And with your help, we'll get it done.
Robert's got a question. What year did the terms for Congress change? And they've never changed. The terms, just so everyone knows what we're talking about, for a U.S. Senator, 1 term is 6 years. For a House member, it's two years. That's never changed. They're able to continue to run, and that's why we have incumbents there for decades. And what we're trying to do is put an end to that, where let's say we do have an amendment currently in Congress. It calls for 2 terms for a U.S. senator, so that means they can only serve 2, and then they're gone. 3 terms for a House member, so that would be a total of 6 years, and then they're gone. If they could bounce back to the other body, so that would give them a total of 18 years total maximum that they could serve in Congress. But the terms themselves have never changed. And so we want to...
Well, and we purposely not set those terms for Article 5, even though congressional proposals do. So we think that once the states get together, they'll figure out all the details and how far reaching. I know there's a lot of different calls for different people being impacted by term limits.
Right.
Hey, guys, I was going to say, why don't I play another video and we ask people?
Hold on real quick. I wanted to address another one because a lot of these questions seem to revolve around the same 2 topics. And the first one is, how do we and this is from Scott, How do we honestly expect that members of Congress to enact laws that are going to end their own careers? We don't. We don't expect them to. That's why we're going around Congress by using Article 5 to go through the states. And then the other one I keep seeing over and over again is put it on the ballot, put it on the ballot.
You already answered that. You already answered that.
Can't. I know, but I wanted to address it again. We can't. Okay.
So we're pushing both ends of we're pushing both ends of the pipe. You know, we have a very active pledge team and activists that call out to both state and federal legislators and get them to sign the pledge, promising to sponsor and vote for a Article 5 resolution. And so, you know, we continue to push both ends of the pipe, not only to force states to pass their own resolution, but to get politicians to sign a pledge to promise to vote for.
All right, guys, I'm going to play a quick video. Well, this is a good video. It kind of gives you a really good overview of term limits. So let me just, I'm going to mute us so we don't have any feedback and just. All right.
I love
Well
that.
done.
I love that.
Well
Yeah.
done.
Thanks. So that kind of gives you, I love some of those quotes, you know, about the importance of term limits, and it's just powerful. The framers, many of our presidents understood the need for term limits, you know. You know what I forgot to do, guys, during the whole JBS presentation? I've got to play this video, okay? So I want to go back to the John Birch Society, everybody.
And what's the average age of the John Birch Society?
Dead.
I can't believe they're still around. I was a small boy when they were old men.
So when I started doing my own research, it really, really irritated me that this organization lied to me and lied to the country, and they lie today. So I did a little digging, and lo and behold, you know what I found out?
Yes.
Yeah, I know you do. So I went back into their own document. I started going through a bunch of materials. Guess what I learned? In the 1960s and the 1970s, the John Birch Society, one of their top 5 issues was to call an Article 5 convention to propose an amendment that was a great amendment. It was called the Liberty Amendment. It's got nothing to do with what Mark Levin wrote about. But this one amendment, if this actually got proposed by the states in the 70s, we would not be in the mess we are in today. It's a phenomenal amendment. And what happened was, when I discovered this, I started writing about it. And the president of JBS, John McManus, apparently felt the heat from it. And I found a video of a presentation. He had to come clean on this, and I want to play that for you right now. And I felt so justified when he had to admit this. So let me just play this real brief video for you.
Legislatures call for a con-con, right? And we backed what he was in favor of years ago. But Willis Stone's, his strategy was to have state legislatures call for a con-con, right? And we backed what he was in favor of years ago. And we backed what he was in favor of years ago.
Is it frozen, Quinn? I can't hear you, Ken.
That was helpful.
So, okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Now we can.
So there's the president of the John Birch Society. We lost Ron, admitting to the fact that back in the 60s, now he calls it a con-con, as you saw.
Yeah, he of course had to do that.
Of course he did. And he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and that's why we call them constitutional hypocrites. This organization is nothing but hypocrites, and they were pushing for this big time. You can go check out some videos online on all this. Sorry, Ron. There we go. Okay.
I think the JBS. I think the JBS has shut me down.
Yeah.
They've got gremlins in our video today.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. Talk about hypocrisy. Okay, and that's what you're dealing with out there, folks.
Hey, by the way, we have tons of this information on our website too, by the way. If you go to Article 5 under the tabs, there's tons of this stuff from the Thornton U.S. term limits case with the Supreme Court. A lot to support. Quinn, you've done an outstanding job with this this op-ed stuff. This is great.
Yeah, those videos are terrific, Quinn.
Hey, do you guys have any more questions that we can address before we close?
No, I think that pretty much sums them all up. There was one that I really couldn't answer, and it didn't have to do with Article 5, but it did have to do with the Constitution. So I kind of passed by it.
Okay, Robert says, would you place a list of these sites that can be copied on this site or on this?
Yeah, Aaron's been doing that. He's been posting the U.S. term limit sites and the pledges.
Okay.
And so, yeah, thank you, Aaron, for getting all that done.
And and again, everything we have is on our website, including videos. Nick's testimony before Congress is there, one of my favorite videos of all time. I know Ken Quinn, you're posting some of this information there. So get to know our website. It's really, there's a ton of great information there.
Well, the videos you're going to see on our YouTube channel. So you want to watch these videos that are on our YouTube channel. And
can you go to your YouTube channel real quick?
I'll link everything I've showed you onto this comment section when we're done, so you have access to it.
And you can get to our YouTube channel on our on our website too.
Oh yeah, yep. Let's see. I'm just looking for any more questions. Listen, this comes up a lot as well. Not the voting, but we not only want term limits, we want no pension, no health care, no benefits. I get it, guys. Okay, but we can't get distracted with all those things. We can't add those issues to our application. This can only be for congressional term. Those things will come. Once we get term limits in place, those things can be introduced by the new members that are going there with a mandate from the voters to make good changes. It's not going to come through an Article 5 convention, and we can't add it to this application. So just stay focused, laser focused on the issue, term limits for Congress. That's all I got to say on that.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Then it puts an expiration date on all the politicians, and then you know exactly they're going to focus more on the other issues that we all need, that we all know are important to us. Balanced budget, campaign finance, all those kinds of things will happen once we get Congress in line.
Now, Bill's got a question from Ohio. What is going to be done about the long timers in the House of Representatives and I think in the Senate? Disappeared. Okay, well, that's what we're talking about. We want to get rid of the long termers, the career politicians. Now, the beauty of this is this, guys. We want the states to do this. Think about it. If Congress proposes term limits for themselves, they're going to grandfather themselves in. It's not going to affect them. So basically, the clock will start fresh with them, so that will give them another 18 years, right? We want the states to do this, because think about it. A lot of state legislators want to be members of Congress. What do you think they're going to do? They are going to draft an amendment that will basically talk about draining the swamp. I bet 2/3 of the current members of the House and Senate will be taken out of office the election after the ratification of that amendment. It's going to open up the floodgates of open seats. And so that's why we want the states to do this, so it's not a nice cushy golden parachute there for the members that are in Congress now.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.
Yep.
All right. Well, I've got nothing else. I guess we'll call this a wrap. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Like I said, I'll post some of the stuff up on these comments, so come on back. But help us in your state. Get involved. Sign the petition. Get your candidates. Now, this is critical. Get your candidates for office for the state House and the state Senate. Make them sign that pledge. If they call you, if they come to your door, say, listen, before you say a word, where do you stand on the U.S. term limits pledge? Because if you can't support this effort that 82% of the American people want, why should I vote for you? That's what I say.
Right. That's exactly right.
Well, we have a lot of people that have made that commitment that they're not going to vote for any politician that hasn't signed our pledge. Maybe it's not a big percentage, but I told one of the politicians running, I said it could be 10%, and that's enough to flip a seat.
That's right. In pretty much any race, 10% is enough to flip the seat. There you have it.
All right, everybody. I think we're going to call it a wrap. So thank you, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Be safe.